Okay, biggest winners edition here of the NFL draft. These are my picks, not necessarily for who got the most talent. If I did that, I'd probably just say Cam Ward, as the Titans with Cam Ward. Probably that's going to be the best, at least most valuable prospect if he hits. But that is not what I'm doing here. I am going with the teams that I think maximize their value the best. How did I feel about this team entering the draft, and then how well did they do with those selections? Whose stock raised the most from night before the draft to today? That is what we're doing here. Let's jump into the list, starting off with number 7. I decided to go with the Houston Texans here, and a great draft doesn't necessarily mean I loved every single selection. There were a couple that I don't know if were exactly what you would love later on in the draft, but ultimately they had 9 picks, so they kind of could afford to take a chance here and there, but ultimately I just liked what they kind of did with their top picks. First off, Jaden Higgins is a player who I think is a really underrated player. I had a mid-first round grade on him in this draft class, which is a bit of a weaker class, but I had him, I think, as my 16th or 17th rated prospect, so ultimately he falls to 34, falls for me, was projected to go 47, but I think this guy could be a Nico Collins 2, essentially. I think he has that level of talent, and that's not disrespect to Nico Collins. That's praise to Jaden Higgins, because I think they're both great. Will he reach that potential? We'll see. But they did draft an offensive lineman, Ariante Essery, who was right around when he was projected to go, but helping out the offensive line that way. They also added Jalen Knoll, who should be a good wide receiver for them as well. So pumping resources there and getting some extra picks by trading out of the first round, I would say is a pretty good draft. At number 6, this is maybe a homer take because I am a Tampa Bay fan, but I'm going with the Buccaneers here. I like what they did. Now, the first round pick of Emeka Egbuka is just a controversial one, but to me, I like it. He's going to get a lot of snaps. He is. Wide receivers, in my opinion, is the second most important position in football behind quarterback. Traditionally, you look at the teams that win more games, it tends to be, quarterback is the most correlated to winning games. Good wide receivers is the second most correlated to winning games. I did a whole study on that a couple years ago. I don't know if I can count what I do with studies, but you know what I mean. And that tended to be the case. So I'm totally fine with it. Is Egbuka, is he going to be a number 1 caliber receiver? I trust Jason Light knows what he's doing. Wasn't my favorite receiver in the class, but was a receiver I really liked. They then added some cornerback depth, which they desperately needed. Benjamin Morrison, Jacob Parrish, who both could be some, good. I think Morrison could be a good outside corner. Parrish can maybe do some other things for them, and they just needed depth there. So that way, they're not going to have a situation where when one injury happens, they could be in trouble. David Walker is a really interesting player. Amazing metrics out of small school. We'll see what works there, but getting some other depth pieces as well. I just think what they did was smart. So attacking where they needed to attack, but still getting the right players as well. I think that's pretty smart. Also, I think if I remember correctly, I put them on my 7 losers list of night 1 just because it was a slight reach with Egbuka, but I think it's aged with me well enough, and I just love what they did later on in the draft. That's why I still feel like they were good enough here. Next up, we have the Philadelphia Eagles, another team that ended up with a ton of draft picks, 10 in total, and a few I really liked. Jahad Campbell was a player that I think, I would have loved to see Tampa Bay go after. At pick 19, he falls to 31. They trade up 1 spot, so I have to imagine there was someone else trying to get Campbell, but they wanted him. They get him. He should be an awesome player for them. And then Andrew Makuba is another player who I think is really good. I think he's an underrated prospect, and I think he's going to be a good player for them. Some other interesting selections, across the board, including things like getting Cameron Williams, a guy who is projected to go 99th. He falls to them at 207, so they tend to do a pretty good job of doing good in the margins as well. A lot of picks, some smart ones at the top, so they make the list. Number 4, I am going to put a team that some people might put in the losers category, but I am not one of those people. First, just not overthinking the Abdul Carter pick. He's the best player on the board. Are there bigger needs? Sure, but then you're getting a worse player, so just get the best player available. That was smart. I'm a Jackson Dart fan. I think Jackson Dart's a good quarterback. Not everyone agrees. You can watch my film study if you want to hear more of my thoughts on Dart. But yeah, I like his game. I think he could be good, and I think that ultimately they're going to have him sit for a year, learn more of the NFL playbook, which he will have to learn. He's a bit of a developmental guy, but, let him develop, sit for a year. Ultimately, hopefully he can get into, maybe a game late in the year, and then next year you can hopefully have him play well. That's the plan there. They also got Darius Alexander, who should be a solid interior defensive lineman, and Cam Scattaboo, who is just an electric runner who has sky-high potential, so that's fun as well. Ultimately, I really like this draft. Number 3 on the list is going to be the Arizona Cardinals, largely due to Will Johnson, who was supposed to, 13th on the consensus big board, ends up, some people were more concerned about the injury. They're getting him at 47. If he turns into, what people think he can be, which is kind of a shutdown corner, that's amazing value for a mid-second round pick. They also got Walter Nolan, who should be a really good interior as well. Some other interesting selections across the board. Cody Simon. There's some interesting players, but really it's those two that are why they made this list. The Ravens kind of similar actually, where it's largely their top 2 picks are why they made the list. And listen, we can talk about the whole ethics of the Mike Green situation. The reality is he was projected to go 17th. He falls to them at 59th. The tape is way better than a late second round pick tape. So to get him at 59th is going to certainly help the Ravens win football games. And Malachi Starks is a really good player as well. So these are 2 guys that some people had as top 10 picks. There were people that liked both of these guys enough to do that. My podcast co-host Kyle, when we did our mock draft, selected Malachi Starks with pick number 10. So, that's certainly interesting. But yeah, a lot of other picks too. The Ravens tend to compile as many picks as they possibly can. They ended up with 9 other picks besides that, so 11 total. So not only did you nail a couple of top picks, but you got some other players. They did draft a kicker, which there's things you can pay attention to there with that, with the whole Justin Tucker thing. But ultimately, got a lot of talent here. Ravens kind of continuing to be the Ravens. But my number 1 team is a team in the Ravens division. Yes, the Cleveland Browns are the biggest winners, according to me. Why? Why do I like what the Browns did so much? Well, the first thing and the main thing I liked about this is the trade back. Where at first I'm like, hey, Travis Hunter is kind of this very unique player. Like, is it smart to be not going after that guy? But if you think about it, they got several premium picks, an early second rounder and a first rounder from Jacksonville next year. Who knows where that ends up being? That could end up being a very high pick depending on how things break out. So they get essentially Mason Graham and Quinton Judkins with this plus a future first round pick. I think that's just good value. I think Mason Graham's going to be awesome for them. So I really liked the trade in general, and I think that was smart. Harold Fannin Jr. is a guy who I liked. They get him at 67. I think he could have gone higher. They also add Dylan Gabriel and Shedeur Sanders, 2 players that, we'll see, right? But they need quarterbacks, and having a couple of options here, maybe they both go into training camp and stink and you need a quarterback next year. Okay, that's fine. But they didn't have to spend a premium pick on either of these guys, and we're still able to, get them in the locker room, and we'll see what happens. There were people that thought the Browns should have drafted Shedeur Sanders 2nd overall. Instead, they trade back out of the 2nd overall pick and get him 142 picks later, while still being able to get a ton of value. Yeah, they are my biggest winner. But that's what I think. What do you guys think? Let me know in the comments below. Who did I leave out? Always love hearing from y'all. And of course, as always, thanks for watching.